I let the towel fall before he even said anything. I stood there in front of him. Like Eve in the Garden of Eden, the space between us was full of strong tension. Like a fire we had tried to forget for too long. He stared at me like a hunter about to catch its prey. Every breath he took made me freeze, a mix of excitement and nervousness filling me. Then suddenly, he grabbed my waist and carried me to the bed. He placed a finger between my thighs, feeling how wet I already was, then touched the sensitive part that was waiting for his touch. I closed my eyes as a wave of chills ran through my body. My name is Ivy. This story isn't only about desire, but about a risky game between me and a rich man. And I was ready to do whatever it took to win. This is how it began. The party was in full swing. The room was filled with soft lights and smooth jazz music floating through the air. My brother's birthday was being celebrated in one of the most luxurious clubs in the city. Glasses of champagne clinked, and the sound of talking filled the air like a warm blanket. But I only had eyes for him, Leo Berlus. He was standing at the bar, holding a glass of brown liquor, his sharp eyes moving over the crowd like he didn't care. He gave off a strong and mysterious feeling that made him stand out from the rest. He wasn't just good-looking. He was someone you couldn't ignore. I had seen him before, at events my brother invited him to. He was always polite, but distant, always with powerful people, and always out of reach. But tonight, I wanted him to notice me. My heart beat faster just thinking about him looking my way. "Ivy!" My brother's voice snapped me out of it. He came over with a big smile. "I want to introduce you to someone." My heart jumped as he stepped aside to show Leo standing next to him. Up close, he looked even more powerful. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and his cold eyes looked me over quickly before he held out his hand. "Ivy Bennett," he said in a deep voice. I froze, unable to stop staring into his eyes. His hand was warm and strong. That handshake was short, but it left a strange feeling on my skin. "Nice to meet you, Leo." He didn't say anything else, just gave a small nod and looked away. I could have felt hurt, but instead, my interest in him only grew stronger. The rest of the night, I kept watching him from a distance. I saw every little move, every small smile he gave to people he was talking to. He had a unique way of paying attention, not talking much but still standing out. He never looked at me again, but I couldn't stop staring. I was already caught. "He's something, isn't he?" someone said behind me. I turned to see Cassie, my best friend, watching me with a knowing smile. "Who?" I asked, pretending I didn't know. She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Ivy. I saw you staring at him like you wanted to eat him." I bit my lip, not able to deny it. Cassie knew me too well. "He's different," I said finally. Cassie nodded with a smirk. "And impossible to catch. He never gets close to anyone." I looked away, hiding my thoughts. "That's not what I want," I lied. She didn't believe me, but didn't say more. Cassie could tell I was lying to myself. Then I looked at Leo again, and this time he was looking back. Our eyes met. Just one short look, but it was enough. For the first time he had really seen me. A chill ran down my back. That look was the start of something dangerous. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That one look from Leo, It was quick and small, but it lit a fire inside me, a fire I didn't know how to put out. The next morning, while I was drinking coffee, a message from my brother appeared on my phone. "Business dinner tonight. Leo will be there. Come." I pressed my lips together as my heart began beating faster. I knew chances like this wouldn't come often. Cassie, who had stayed over after working on a project with me, noticed. "Message from your brother?" she asked while drinking tea. "Yes, he wants me at a business dinner tonight. Leo will be there." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's your plan this time?" I shrugged, hiding my feelings. "Nothing. I'll just watch." Cassie laughed and shook her head. "Ivy, please. You're not someone who just watches." She was right, and we both knew it. Since I met Leo, something had grown inside me. A strong interest. He wasn't just attractive. He was a puzzle I wanted to solve. The more I told myself to stop, the more I wanted him. Cassie could see it, even if I didn't want to say it out loud. That night, I wore a stylish black dress, with a slit just enough to attract attention without seeming too obvious. When I got to the restaurant, my brother welcomed me kindly. He was surrounded by his business partners. I looked around the room, my eyes naturally searching for someone familiar. And there he was, sitting at the end of the table. He looked just as strong, just as distant. He raised his head as I walked closer, and our eyes met. A quiet tension formed between us, quick but strong, making me shiver. "Ivy, sit here," my brother said, pulling me back to reality. I sat next to him without saying a word, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I kept looking at the man sitting across from me. People talked about business, new markets, and investments, but I only paid attention to Leo. He listened carefully, nodded sometimes, and gave short answers. Even though he seemed focused, I could feel his eyes on me, light but steady. Trying to be brave, I turned a little toward him. "Did you enjoy the party last night?" I asked casually, watching his reaction. Leo slowly put down his glass and looked into my eyes. "It was nice. Your brother knows how to plan things?" That was all. His answer was polite, with no emotion. It could have stopped the talk, but I didn't want to quit. I didn't want the moment to end. "And you? Do you not enjoy parties?" I asked. He gave a small smile, almost too small to see, but it made my heart beat faster. "Let's say I prefer more meaningful talks." His eyes stayed on mine a little too long. Silence filled the space between us. I felt both nervous and curious at the same time. "And did you have one of those last night?" I asked, pushing the line a bit. His smile grew slightly, and his stare became stronger. "Not yet." It was a mysterious reply, left open. A game was starting, and I wanted to join. The dinner went on in a quiet mood, full of serious talks and toasts to new deals. But I wasn't paying attention. My thoughts stayed with that silent tension between us. Every sentence I shared with Leo felt like a challenge. Every look was a test. I wanted him to really see me, not just as his friend's younger sister. I wanted him to want me, to see me as someone worth facing. When dinner ended, my brother got up to say goodbye to his guests. He shook hands and smiled. I used the moment to quietly walk closer to Leo. My heart beat fast. He was still seated, sitting straight, his eyes looking down at his half-empty glass. He seemed lost in thought. I guess tonight did bring an interesting talk after all, I said. My voice was calm, but I was nervous. He slowly turned toward me, with a small smile on his lips. Maybe. He was playing a game. I could feel it. He was watching me, trying to understand my reasons. Are you always this hard to read? I asked, trying to understand him. I don't spend time on things that don't matter, he answered in a calm voice. But I caught the double meaning in his words. A chill went through me again. It was both scary and exciting, making me even more drawn to him. And do you think I'm not worth your time? I asked, locking eyes with him. I didn't look away. I wanted an answer. Something clear. Silence fell between us again. It was heavy, full of tension I couldn't hide. Then he slowly stood up. He looked tall, strong, and powerful. His eyes didn't leave mine. They were so intense I couldn't move. I think you're serious, but that alone isn't always enough. He walked past me, calm and sure, heading toward the exit. I stayed still, his scent in the air behind him, teasing me like a final message. My heart raced. He had just started a dangerous game, and I was ready to join. A few days later, I kept thinking about that night. Every look, every word stayed in my mind. He wasn't saying no, but he wasn't saying yes either. It was a careful balance, a quiet fight. I felt like he was a wall I couldn't get past, but I believed there was a weak spot. I just needed to find it and act at the right time. Then, I had an idea. Risky, but exciting. I was about to launch my own liquor brand, a big project I had been planning for months. What if Leo became my business partner? He had the strength, the power, and the money to make it a big success. He wouldn't turn down a deal that made sense. His practical thinking and business instinct wouldn't let him. I spent the next few days improving my proposal, going over every number and detail, making sure he had no reason to reject it. I thought about every possible question, and made sure I had answers for all of them. Once I was ready, I picked up my phone and wrote a message. Leo, I have a business idea that might interest you. Lunch to talk? My thumb paused for a second. Before I hit send, I had imagined different replies, but the one I got was better than expected. A few seconds later, my phone lit up. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. My office. A smile spread across my face, filled with both pride and excitement. I had found my chance. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. I was ready to win this game. The next day, I stood in front of the tall building where Leo's office was. The tower was a symbol of power and success. Just like him, the elevator took me to the top floor, where a sharply dressed assistant asked me to wait before letting me in. Everything in that office spoke of control and importance. I reminded myself to stay strong. Mr. Burloose is expecting you. You may enter. I took a deep breath and walked into the office, pretending to feel calm, though I was nervous inside. He was standing by the large window, looking at the city below like it belonged to him. That one pose said so much about who he was. Ivy. He said my name like it meant something, with a tone that made a small chill run through me. But I kept a steady face. Leo. He finally turned around and looked at me with a calm stare that made me uneasy. I felt like he already knew why I had come, as if he had read my mind before I said a word. His eyes studied me carefully, likely deciding whether I was a risk or an opportunity. Sit down, I sat across from him and placed my folder on his dark glass desk. The space between us felt filled with quiet tension, more than just business. "I have a business offer for you." A small smile touched his lips. He leaned back and crossed his fingers, waiting. "I'm listening." His voice was calm, but his eyes were focused and alert. I started my pitch. I explained my plan to produce premium craft liquor. I talked about where it would stand in the market, its future growth, and what made it special. My points were clear, my logic strong. I made sure there were no weak spots. Then I reached the main part. "I want to offer you a partnership. You'll receive 50% of the shares in return for your investment and your business network." My tone was steady and sure. It was not something he could ignore easily. He crossed his fingers again and looked directly at me. Why me? It was a simple question, but it had weight. He wanted to see why I chose him and what my true reason was. I held his gaze. "Because you're the best. And because I believe this will interest you." Every word was chosen carefully, aimed to touch that part of him that wanted control and value. He didn't answer right away. The room felt tense, the silence heavy. He was testing me, trying to figure out if there was more to my plan. Then he leaned forward, closing the space between us. "You're ambitious." His voice was calm, but I saw something shift in his eyes. He recognized that I wouldn't step back. I looked back at him without fear. "I'm determined." My words were clear. Not a request, but a statement. The silence returned, thick and impossible to read. Then, to my surprise, he slowly nodded. "All right, I accept." My heart jumped. I couldn't believe he had said yes so quickly. He didn't argue or delay. He gave me exactly what I wanted. But that also meant something bigger. We were stepping into each other's world. He reached out his hand. I shook it, and a strange, warm feeling rushed through me, both strong and hard to explain. This was no longer just about business. That short handshake meant more than a normal deal. "Welcome to business, Ivy." But I already knew this wouldn't stay as a simple partnership. It was the beginning of a much more dangerous game. Every move, look, and word would be like a step in a chess match. And I had no plan to lose. The days after we signed the contract were like walking through fire. Working with Loveless was exciting, but also exhausting. Every meeting, every word, every look between us carried quiet tension, like something waiting to explode. He stayed calm, focused, and serious, but I felt something hidden underneath that he didn't want to show. I chose to play with that feeling on purpose. I wanted to know how long he could stay in control. I wanted to push him to the edge. That night, I decided to go further. We had a meeting at a private bar with a possible supplier. I wore a red dress that fit my body well without being too revealing. It was just enough to get attention, but still unclear what my true purpose was. When I walked in, Leo was already there, sitting in a quiet corner with a glass of whiskey in hand. His dark eyes noticed me the moment I entered. For a second, his eyes moved down my body before his calm look returned. "You're late." His tone was flat, showing no emotion, but I knew he had taken in everything. I sat across from him with a small smile. "A woman's allowed to take her time to look good, isn't she?" He raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing. The supplier came soon after, and the talk turned to contract details, product quality, and delivery plans. Leo led the talk with skill, taking control of the room. His steady tone, sharp focus, and quiet strength earned respect from everyone, but I was playing a different role. Under the table, I let my crossed leg brush lightly against his. A quick touch, almost nothing, but fully planned. He didn't react right away. But a few minutes later, while still talking, I felt his knee press back against my leg. He had answered. My heart beat faster, and I gently brushed his leg again, acting as if nothing happened. He didn't look away from the supplier, but I saw his jaw tighten just a little. I knew I had touched something. When the meeting ended, he stood up smoothly, buttoned his suit, and leaned close to me. "Don't play this game with me, Ivy. You don't know what you're starting." His voice was low and rough, more of a warning, but it felt like a promise. Then he walked away without looking back, leaving me standing there, my heart racing. I had awakened something in him, and I knew this was only the start. That night, I kept thinking about his words. "Don't play this game with me, Ivy. You don't know what you're starting." That line stayed in my mind, like a quiet dare. He thought he was warning me, but he didn't know that I enjoyed this kind of challenge. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I wasn't going to stop. The next day, I was called to a meeting in Leo's office. I carefully chose what to wear. Something simple, but still elegant. A black pencil skirt and a white shirt, slightly see-through under the light. I left one button undone, just enough to show a hint of skin. I wanted to test his limits. I wanted to see how long he could keep his control. When I walked in, he was standing and looking at documents. He barely looked up, but I caught a quick glance at my body. I closed the door behind me and walked slowly before sitting across from him. A silence passed between us, broken only by the sound of him turning pages. "You wanted to see me?" I asked calmly, though my tone held a small challenge. He didn't look up right away. "We need to go over the marketing plan before the investor meeting." His words were professional, but his voice sounded a bit tight. He was trying hard to stay focused, but I could feel the pressure building. We talked about numbers and plans for several minutes, but I noticed his attention wasn't fully on the documents. He avoided looking at me directly, but sometimes his eyes moved toward my chest. Every small movement I made seemed to increase the tension in him, so I pushed a little more. I leaned slowly across the table, turning through the papers as if looking for something important. My perfume filled the space, and I noticed a flicker of tension on his face when he looked again. His control was slipping, and I could see it. Then, without thinking, I let my pen fall to the floor. A heavy silence filled the room. I bent down slowly to pick it up, aware of his intense gaze following every move I made. My heart beat fast, waiting for what might happen next. When I stood up again, our eyes met. This time, he didn't look away. Suddenly, he walked around the desk, his steps slow and controlled, but filled with tension. He stopped just in front of me, standing tall above me. His presence surrounded me, and I could almost feel the warmth from his body. "Are you trying to provoke me, Ivy?" His voice was deep and quiet, with a warning that felt almost tempting. The air between us buzzed with tension, holding me in place. I looked into his eyes, my chest rising quickly. Then I gave a slight smile and replied, "Is it working?" A thick silence settled over us. Then, without warning, he moved even closer. He placed both hands on the desk beside me, boxing me in without touching me. I felt his breath near my ear, sending chills down my spine. "You're playing with something you can't control," he said. I raised my head slowly. Our faces now just inches apart. My breath was short, my whole body tight with expectation. "Then let me burn," I answered. The tension grew so strong that time seemed to slow down. I waited, wondering what he would do next. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back. His usual calm expression returned, as if nothing had happened. "Get out," he said, his voice sharp and cold. I stayed still for a second, reading his face. Then I stood, picked up my things, and walked out silently. But one thing was clear. He wasn't avoiding me. He was holding back. And soon, he would stop. For weeks, Leo had been trying to fight what he felt. But I could see the cracks. He was close to giving in. He just needed one final push. And I was ready. I had planned our business trip carefully. We needed to visit a distillery partner, and the location was far enough to make staying overnight necessary. He told me to book 2 rooms, but I had made sure that in the end, there would only be one. I arranged it with the hotel staff. On paper, 2 rooms were reserved, but in truth, there was only 1 suite. It was already too late to find another place, and the area wasn't safe at night. Leo wouldn't be able to argue. The trap was ready. When we got to the hotel, tired after a long day, Leo's face changed when the receptionist explained the mistake. "Only 1 room?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "Yes, Mr. Berluce. The others are full, and I recommend staying. Going out this late wouldn't be safe." He clenched his jaw, tapping his fingers on the counter as he thought. I waited without speaking. He looked at me, clearly expecting a reaction. I just shrugged, pretending to be sorry. He sighed slowly, then took the room key. "I guess we have no other choice." I could feel his frustration, the fight between logic and desire. He handed me the key without a word, and I took it lightly, letting my fingers touch his. The elevator ride was silent, heavy with the things we didn't say. When we reached the suite, he entered first, stopping to take in the room. It was large, stylish, and there was only 1 bed. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You're a millionaire, Leo. That couch doesn't match your style." He gave me a serious look. "I'm not sharing a bed with you, Ivy." I shrugged. "As you wish." I picked up my bag and walked into the bathroom. This was the moment everything would change. I turned on the warm water, undressed slowly, and stepped into the shower. I let the heat wrap around me, fully aware he could hear the water. I knew what he'd picture, but I wanted more. After a few minutes, I left the bathroom door a little open. I knew he'd notice, and he did, through the small gap. I saw him near the couch, fists tight, staring at the shape of my body, behind the misty mirror. He knew he shouldn't look, but he did. A chill passed through me, a mix of power and excitement. I moved slowly under the water, each motion designed to tempt him. I heard him take a deep breath, trying to stay in control. Then, suddenly, he turned and poured himself a drink. But I knew then, he had already lost the fight. When I walked out of the bathroom, skin still warm and only wearing a towel, Leo was standing there with a glass in his hand. His eyes were on me. A jolt went through me as I noticed the change in his body. His eyes followed the shape of my shoulders, my legs still wet. This was it. I stepped closer to him and stopped right in front. He slipped a hand into his pocket, as if trying to hide his reaction. "Are you planning to drink all night?" I asked. I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Then, in a deep and rough voice, he finally said, "What are you trying to do, Ivy?" I leaned in a little, bringing our faces very close. Me? Nothing at all. The air around us felt heavy, filled with silent energy. He placed his glass on the table and stepped closer. I could feel the heat from his body. "You're playing with me, Ivy," he said. I looked up into his eyes, a small smile forming. And what if that's exactly what I want? He closed his eyes for a moment and took a long breath, like he was trying to stay calm. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, I made my move, breaking the last layer of distance between us. What followed was no longer a careful exchange. He acted quickly, basically pulling me toward him and lifting me into his arms. My heart raced, shocked by the sudden shift. There were no more doubts between us. Everything we had held back came to the surface at once. He was no longer holding back, and I didn't want him to. Each moment felt intense, like a storm we had waited too long to face. He touched me, as if he needed to learn every part of me, as if he had waited forever for this. "I can't think straight around you," he whispered against my neck. His presence overwhelmed me. Every movement, every breath, left me more lost in the moment. He paused for a second, staring into my eyes. "Don't move," he said. Then he stepped away for a moment, giving me time to catch my breath. But the tension only grew stronger. I waited, my heart pounding. When he returned, the way he looked at me said everything. He knew I had pushed him to the edge, and now he was ready to show me just how far he could go. What followed was a rush of feelings. Intense, overwhelming, unforgettable. We had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The next morning, I woke slowly. I was wrapped in warmth, his arm resting around my waist. I could feel his steady breath at my neck. His scent still lingered, bringing back every moment from the night before. A smile tugged at my lips. I had won. But now I didn't just want a victory. I was already thinking of what might come next. I turned toward him, watching his face while he slept. Even at rest, he looked strong and striking. A lock of hair had fallen over his forehead, softening his usual expression. As if he could feel me watching, he slowly opened his eyes. Those dark eyes held everything we had just shared, and something more. We stared at each other in silence, the weight of what had happened between us still hanging in the air. Neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, the silence saying everything words couldn't. His expression was unreadable, but something had changed. I could feel it. Last night hadn't just been passion. It had broken a wall between us. Now there was no pretending. I sat up slowly, holding the blanket to my chest, and looked around the room. Leo remained still, his eyes on me. "What are you thinking?" I asked softly. He paused, then sat up as well. That this wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. "Yes." And now? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out at the city below. I watched his back, unsure of what was going through his mind. He had always been controlled, distant, but last night, I saw another side of him, honest, raw. Now, that side was buried again behind silence. "I'm not going to pretend it meant nothing," I said, standing and wrapping the blanket around me. He turned his head slightly, but didn't meet my eyes. "I don't regret it," he said finally, "but this complicates things. We're already in it, Leo. This isn't something we can ignore." He sighed and turned to face me. His face was serious, but his eyes held something softer. "You're not what I expected." "And you're exactly what I expected," I replied, stepping closer. "Complicated, guarded, but real." He studied me for a long moment, then reached out and gently touched my cheek. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't," I whispered. We stood in silence again. This time not from fear, but understanding. Something real had started between us, and neither of us knew where it would go. But we were no longer pretending to be just business partners. That much was clear. We returned from the trip the next afternoon. At the office, everything seemed normal. Colleagues greeted us, unaware of what had changed between us. But every glance we exchanged, every pause in conversation, carried the memory of that night. Leo acted as if nothing had happened. He kept his usual calm, answered emails, led meetings, but I noticed the small signs. His fingers drumming more than usual, the way his eyes sometimes lingered too long on me before looking away. He was fighting it again, and I wasn't going to let him forget. Later that week, we had a team dinner to meet new investors. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes late, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. Leo was already seated, surrounded by staff and guests. His eyes met mine the second I walked in. He didn't smile, but his gaze followed me the whole way to the table. Throughout the evening I played my role. I laughed. I spoke about business. I smiled at everyone, but I felt his eyes on me. When the others were distracted, I looked at him and gently raised an eyebrow. Just a small reminder that I hadn't forgotten. After the dinner, we both left through the back door to avoid the press. The alley was quiet, dimly lit. I leaned against the wall, watching him walk toward me. "You've been quiet," I said. "We're at work," he replied, his voice firm. "And now we're not." He stopped a few steps in front of me. "You're making this harder than it should be." "I'm not making anything," I said. "I'm just not pretending." His jaw tensed. For a second, I thought he might turn away again, but then he stepped closer, his voice lower. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night." "Then why are you acting like it didn't happen?" "Because if I give in again, I won't be able to stop." I looked up at him, heart racing. "Then don't stop." A long silence stretched between us. Then finally, he raised his hand and brushed his fingers against my cheek. "This will change everything," he said. "It already has," I whispered, and just like that, he leaned down and kissed me. Not rushed, not wild like before, but steady, like he had decided to stop fighting. This time, we both knew there would be no going back. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Leo's door was still closed, and the team was already busy preparing for an upcoming investor meeting. Everyone acted normal, unaware that something unspoken had changed between the two people leading the project. By mid-morning, I was called into Leo's office. He didn't look up when I entered. He was reviewing documents, flipping pages with his usual focus. I closed the door behind me and waited. After a moment, he spoke without looking at me. "We can't let what happened between us interfere with the work." "Is that why you're avoiding me?" I asked. "I'm not avoiding you," he said. I'm trying to protect both of us. From what? He finally looked up, his eyes serious. From making a mistake we can't undo. I crossed my arms. I don't think it was a mistake, he sighed, setting the papers down. You're not the problem, Ivy. I am. I've always kept a clear line between business and personal life. That line is gone now. And you regret that? No, he said quietly. But it makes everything more complicated. I walked closer to his desk. We're both adults. We knew what we were doing. The only thing that makes this complicated is pretending it didn't mean anything. He didn't respond right away. Then he stood and walked to the window, the same way he always did when thinking too hard. You challenge me in ways I didn't expect, he said finally, and that's dangerous. For both of us. But it's also real, I said. And maybe it's time you stop running from that. He turned toward me again. For a second, the guarded look in his eyes faded. You're not just part of this company anymore, he said. You're part of something else. Something I didn't plan for. I nodded. Neither did I. We stood there in silence again. Two people caught between control and connection, logic and feeling. Finally, he spoke. Let's take this one step at a time. I gave a small smile. That's all I wanted. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said enough. He wasn't fighting this anymore. Not completely. And I knew, from that moment on, everything was going to change. At work, in life, and between us. It started with whispers. At first, it was just quiet looks exchanged between team members, a pause in conversation when I entered a room, the feeling that something was being left unsaid. Then came the questions, subtle but pointed. Did you and Mr. Burles stay late again last night? You two seem to work well together, very closely. I answered with a smile and kept moving. But I could feel the shift. Leo and I hadn't spoken about what we were. Not in clear words, but we both knew something had changed. And now, others were starting to notice. One afternoon, during a break in a team meeting, Cassie, our marketing lead and someone I'd worked with for years, pulled me aside. Are you and Leo? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I paused. What are you asking exactly? She gave me a knowing look. You're not as subtle as you think, Ivy. I've seen the way he looks at you. I hesitated, then said carefully, It's not something I want to explain right now. Cassie smiled. Fair enough, just be careful. If this turns into office gossip, it could get messy. Especially for you. I nodded, her words lingering. She wasn't judging. She was warning me. Later that evening, I went to Leo's office. He was finishing a call when I stepped in. As he hung up, he looked at me and knew something was wrong. They're starting to talk, I said. He didn't react right away. Then he nodded. I figured it would happen eventually. What are we going to do? He stood and walked toward me. We don't owe anyone an explanation, but we do need to be smart. If this affects your position, or mine, it won't be about us anymore. It'll be about the company. I looked at him. So, do we stop? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, No, but we keep it private until we decide what this is. His words were careful, but his tone was sure. I understood. We weren't hiding out of shame. We were protecting something fragile, something still new. As I left his office that night, I knew things were only going to get harder. But I also knew something else. Whatever we were building, we were doing it together. A week later, the tension finally reached a breaking point. Rumors had started to spread beyond the office. A blog post, anonymous but clearly written by someone inside the company, hinted at a quiet relationship between a senior executive and a rising team lead. It didn't name us, but it didn't have to. By the time we stepped into the boardroom for the monthly meeting, I could feel the atmosphere had changed. The usual small talk had disappeared. Some board members avoided eye contact. Others watched us too closely. Leo entered behind me, calm as always, holding a folder of reports. I sat across from him, as we had done a dozen times before, but this time I could feel the difference. Midway through the meeting, one of the older board members, Mr. Clausen, leaned back in his chair and spoke. "Before we move on, I'd like to raise a concern about professionalism and workplace boundaries." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. Leo didn't flinch. "If you have something to say it directly." Mr. Clausen smiled, thin and cold. "There's been talk, and it's affecting confidence. Personal matters should never influence professional decision-making, especially at this level." All eyes turned to Leo, then to me. He stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "This company is built on performance and results. Anyone who questions that is welcome to review the numbers. If anyone wants to question character, do it with facts, not rumors." I felt my heartbeat in my ears. He had defended us, but it wasn't over. After the meeting, Leo asked me to come to his office. He closed the door behind us and turned to me. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. They're going to question your role, your place here." I looked at him, calm but honest. "Then let them. I'm not here because of you. I've earned my seat at the table. And if anyone doubts that, they'll find out who I really am." He nodded slowly, pride in his eyes. "I never doubted you." We stood in silence, not afraid, not shaken, but aware. This was the moment we realized. What we had was real, but it wouldn't survive without strength, patience, and trust, and we were ready to fight for it. The day after the board meeting, I asked for a meeting with the executive team without Leo. I needed to speak for myself. As I stood in front of the long table, filled with people who had worked here longer than I had, I felt their eyes on me, not as a team lead, but as the woman they had been whispering about. "I know there have been rumors," I began, "and I'm not here to deny or confirm anything personal. What I am here to say is this. My work speaks for itself. The numbers, the clients, the results. That's what I've built here." Someone shifted in their seat. Another scribbled something down. I kept going. "Anyone who has questions about my qualifications or my loyalty to this company is free to speak. But if the only concern is who I'm seen leaving a restaurant with after hours, then I suggest we refocus on the business, not the gossip." The room was quiet when I finished. I walked out with my head high, not because I wasn't affected, but because I refused to let them define me. Later that evening, Leo stopped by my apartment for the first time. No driver, no schedule, just him. When I opened the door, he stood there, tired but silent. "You stood up for both of us today," he said. "I should have done that sooner." I let him in without a word. He sat down on the edge of my couch, rubbing his hands together like he didn't know what to say next. "I've always kept people at a distance," he said quietly. "It's easier that way. Safer." "But you let me in," I replied. He nodded slowly. "That's what scares me." I sat beside him. "I'm not asking you to stop being who you are, but if this is going to work, whatever this is, you can't keep shutting me out when things get hard." He looked at me, his walls beginning to crack again. I don't want to lose control. Then maybe it's time to learn that not all control is power, I said. Sometimes it's trust. He didn't answer right away, but he reached out and took my hand. It was the first time I'd seen him drop the act completely. No careful words, no strategy, just truth. And I knew in that moment, if we could survive the doubt from others, we might just survive the doubt inside ourselves too. The following week, we were scheduled to present our product at a major investor conference. It was the biggest pitch of the year, one that could decide the future of the company's expansion. All the top investors would be there. Every move, every word would be watched. We had prepared for weeks. But now, with everything that had happened between us, the pressure felt different. I arrived early to the venue, reviewing my slides, walking the stage, rehearsing lines I already knew by heart. I wasn't nervous about the content. I was nervous about us, how we would come across. Would they see a confident team or something else? Leo arrived just before the presentation, dressed sharp as always, calm on the outside, but I noticed the small things, the way he adjusted his cuff more than once, the way he scanned the room too quickly. We stood backstage, just the two of us. "You ready?" I asked, adjusting my blazer. "I've never doubted you," he said. "I'm not the one I'm worried about." He gave me a small smile. "Then let's prove them wrong." When we stepped onto the stage, the room went silent. Lights dimmed. Eyes turned toward us. I led the first part of the presentation, introducing the product line, explaining the growth strategy, and outlining market response. My voice was steady, my mind focused. Leo took over the financial section, returns, margins, projected earnings. He spoke with clarity, with command. Every question the investors asked, he answered with ease. We didn't interrupt each other. We didn't overstep. We moved like one voice split in two. At the end, we stood side by side for closing remarks. "This company was built on risk and reward," Leo said, his voice clear. "And we believe in investing in people who know how to lead, not just behind a desk, but in front of it." I glanced at him. It was subtle, but it was there. A message, not just about me, about us. When the presentation ended, the applause was firm. A few key investors approached us right away, praising the clarity, the direction, the confidence. Later, as we stepped out into the hallway, Leo turned to me. We made our point. I nodded, without saying a word. "That's the power of staying united," he said. In that moment, I realized something important. We weren't just a team in private. We had become something more, something others could see and trust. And for the first time, I wasn't worried about being seen. I was proud of it. Days passed after the presentation, and the response had been better than anyone expected. We received new offers. Investor interest grew, and even the board's tone shifted. The whispers had faded, not because the rumors disappeared, but because we had proved our value. But something was still unsettled between us. We continued working side by side, calm, focused, professional. But when the meetings ended, when the doors closed, we didn't talk about what came next. One evening, after a long meeting with a potential partner, Leo asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Not at the usual place. Not in public. Just us. We ended up at a quiet rooftop restaurant on the edge of the city. No cameras. No staff from the office. Just music. Soft light. and the sky beginning to fade from orange to night. We didn't talk about work. For once, we talked about ourselves, where we came from, what we had wanted to be before titles and contracts. I told him about my first job, about my doubts when I joined his company. He told me about his father, the pressure to take over, the walls he had learned to build. I thought I had to control everything to protect it, he said. But now I wonder if I've been keeping too much out. You let me in, I said gently. That's a start. He looked at me for a long moment. Ivy, what are we doing? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Something real. Something worth naming. He leaned back, quiet. I've never had anything like this. Not like this. Then stop pretending it's temporary. He reached across the table, took my hand, and held it with purpose. I don't want it to be temporary, he said. Not anymore. I smiled, the weight I had carried for weeks finally lifting. Then say it. He looked me in the eyes. I want us to be together, not just when no one's watching. I want this, for real. It wasn't grand. It wasn't rehearsed. But it was true, and sometimes that's all that matters. A few weeks later, we stopped hiding. It wasn't a big announcement. There were no press releases or official statements. But we started arriving together, leaving together, holding hands in the elevator. We didn't avoid the questions anymore. At first, people stared, but no one said much. Because now, the results spoke louder than the rumors ever could. Still, going public changed things. Some board members remained quiet, but clearly disapproved. A few clients began asking more personal questions during meetings, as if our relationship was part of the business deal. And inside the company, even old colleagues began seeing me differently, like I had more power, or maybe just more eyes on me. Leo noticed it too. Do you feel like you've lost something? He asked one evening as we walked through the quiet halls of the building. No, I said truthfully. I feel like I've gained something bigger. But now everything I do is watched. He nodded. I wish I could protect you from that. You already are. Just not the way you think. He was silent for a while before saying, My mother wants to meet you. I stopped walking. Really? She asked. I think she wants to understand who you are. And what if she doesn't like who I am? Then she'll have to deal with it, he said, his voice steady. Because I'm not letting you go. The dinner was formal. His mother, elegant, reserved, watched me carefully the entire night. She asked polite questions, gave polite smiles, but I could tell she wasn't sure yet. After dessert, she pulled Leo aside. I stayed at the table, pretending not to notice, even though I watched every movement. Later in the car, Leo told me what she said. She said you're strong. Maybe too strong for someone like me. I raised an eyebrow. Too strong? She meant it as a warning. And what do you think? He looked at me. I think you're exactly what I need. That night, for the first time, he stayed over at my place. Not just for a few hours, not for a night, but as someone who didn't want to leave. We talked about everything. The future, the company, what we wanted in 5 years. 10. I never pictured myself as someone who'd settle down, Leo said. But then again, I never pictured someone like you. You don't need to settle, I said, smiling. You just need to stay. He kissed my forehead and whispered, Then I'm staying. Months passed. The company grew stronger. Our project, once questioned, had become one of the most successful ventures of the year. Investors were confident. The board had gone quiet. And slowly, the gossip faded. But something else had started to grow too. We had learned to live with the attention, the pressure, the long days, the unexpected meetings, the small glances from across the room that still meant more than words. Leo had changed, not in who he was, but in how open he had become. He listened more, sobbed, smiled more. He still held on to control in business, but with me, he had learned to let some of it go. One evening, I came home to find the lights dimmed and music playing softly. Leo was in the kitchen, not wearing a suit for once, but a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, happy. "What is this?" I asked. "Get curious. A quiet dinner," he said. "No phones, no meetings, just us." We sat down and ate together. No tension, no planning, just quiet conversation and the sound of rain outside. Then he stood and reached into his pocket. My breath caught. "I never thought I'd ask anyone this," he said, stepping closer. "But I want to build everything with you. Ivy, I want the meetings, the pressure, the quiet nights, and everything in between. Will you marry me?" I looked at him, at the man I once called unreachable, untouchable, and I smiled. "Not because I need you," I said gently, "but because I choose you." His eyes softened. "That's all I've ever wanted." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it felt right, not just because it sparkled or fit perfectly, but because I had earned everything that led to this moment. On my own terms. A few days later, as I stood before the same office I had walked into months ago, once full of doubt and whispers, I realized something important. I didn't just win him, I built something. With him. For me. For us. And this time, everyone would see it. Not because I had something to prove, but because I no longer needed to. Was your heart holding its breath? If you felt the weight of every look, every word, and every choice. Like this video, and subscribe for more stories that pull you in. Share your favorite moment in the comments. And remember, love doesn't always arrive quietly. Sometimes it storms in.